one thing about being a founder that no one prepared you for?
I think the hard part about being a founder is the consequences and the accountability, because when your entire outcome of your family's future, when your entire identity is tied up in a business that you founded and all of the accountability leads back to you, it's incredibly stressful. No one can articulate what being a founder's like. It's just like you can't really explain what being a father's like until you've done it. There is so much noise out there. People are saying you need to do conversion optimization, SEO, Google Ads, TikTok. They do so much they don't know what thing actually worked and what didn't, so there's no cause and effect. So I think it's probably just like there's a massive clarity deficit. If your product has any negative word of mouth, it's such a killer. And even if it doesn't have negative word of mouth, if you're not so good that it's remarkable, as in people remark about it to their friends, then it's kind of a grind.
You spend a lot of time in the ecom space. What do most founders in ecom get wrong?
I think they just don't know.
I wanted to share something that you said recently on stage. And for context for the audience, you and I were at an event in the Gold Coast recently, and you went on stage and shared something that really made me think about the concept of change. And I'm paraphrasing here, okay? So bear with me. But you're basically saying that in 2020, you were on the way back from the hospital because your, I think, second daughter was born. Yep. And you went and bought a Dyson purifier because at that stage you were living near the coal tracks in Newcastle.
Yep.
And you were worried about coal dust.
Yep.
And when I heard you say that, I was like, wow, like we're in 2025, 2020, like not a long period of time.
No.
2024, you know, you got a piece of your business acquired through PE, through Glow Capital.
Yeah.
And it just made me stop and think about like change. And so my question for you is, if you could boil it down to one thing, just one thing that was instrumental to the direction of change that your business went through from 2020 to 2025, because it's geometrically blown up, what would you boil the one thing down to?
I mean, like anything, it's hard to kind of distill it down into like one thing. Usually it's like so multifaceted and there's like different vectors that sort of send you in a different direction. But I think it was, if I had to sort of say like what was the one driving thing, it was probably the fact that stuff needed to change. You know, it wasn't a nice to have or something that I kind of wanted as a background thought. It was like I created such a impetus in my life to actually have a different situation that the actions I took, how I showed up every day, what I focused on, and what I sort of pushed through led to the change, if that makes sense. So I think it's probably just the fact that the stakes that were on the line were great enough that I actually took the actions and did the things I needed to do, if I kind of boiled it down. And I know that story sounds dramatic of like the, you know, coming home with my second daughter and like thinking, gee, Tice Hill's like, we were literally like 100 metres from the coal tracks in Newcastle. It's a great suburb, like it's a good suburb, but we were on the dodgy end of a street. But it just seemed normal at the time. Like it didn't actually seem like, it's like so many things, you just like your condition seems normal because that's what you're used to. It didn't actually seem like it was like crazy bad at the time. But when you look back on it, like it's such a stark contrast to like where things go.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it wasn't like, we weren't like doing terribly. It was just, you know, we had an average house in a average suburb and I kind of wanted more, you know, and I wanted more so badly that I took action in that direction pretty vigorously for a pretty long period of time. Yeah.
Well, you know, out of everything you shared on stage, like that actually struck the chord for me because I was just thinking like, wow, like things can change really quickly.
They can. They can.
I was just like thinking, wow, like it is a short period of time, but you could argue it's not because you started your first agency in 2012?
2012 was my first business, yeah.
Yeah.
So kind of got into business, I guess it's 13 years ago now. I was 24, 25. And yeah, I think like a lot of things, like there's this performance curve where sort of 80% of the time delivers 20% of the outcome. and then the last 20% of time delivers 80% of the outcome. So a lot of people are kind of riding this performance curve, and they've put in all the foundational effort. They've learned a valuable skill, or they might have, laid a lot of the foundational business knowledge that they need to kind of get to that next level. And they don't realize that like you've done 80% of the hard work, and you've only seen 20% of the results for that. But the next push is where you get such a disproportionate outcome.
True.
And so like I think that's kind of what happens, right? Like my first business was 7 years. I didn't make a ton of money, but I did all right out of it. Then it just compounds, and it compounds. Everyone hears about compounding until you've actually experienced like the hockey stick part of the curve. It's kind of hard to actually conceptualize it. It's just hard to understand how much compounding and how geometric things can go when you just keep putting in the effort consistently.
So 2012, you started your first agency.
Yep.
Why did you start an agency?
I always wanted to have money. And I think that from the very outset, like I did a finance degree at Newcastle Uni, because I wanted money, and I thought, who's got money? People in finance. So that kind of like, I did economics in school and really liked that, and then I got into finance, and then I did like I was a financial planning assistant, then I was a deals assistant on a stockbroking desk, then I did derivatives trading, so I had like an early finance career, and unfortunately it was sort of like I graduated in 2008 with a finance degree. It was really bad timing because it was GFC, right? Literally the worst time you could graduate with a finance degree. And I stuck it out for sort of 4 or 5 years, but it was just like the industry had sort of really gone on the nose. So in 2012, it was sort of a serendipitous opportunity. I think I was receptive to that opportunity because I'd read so many money books, like The Millionaire Next Door, just sort of explains that most people that are wealthy have a business, So I think I was really receptive and open to it. So when the opportunity knocked and a friend kind of called me and said, do you want to start a business with me? I just sort of jumped at it, right? And I was in London at the time. London sucked. It was like winter, and I was getting the tube to work every day, and it was just like miserable. So I was like, I'm definitely coming back to Sydney, and sort of started a business with a friend. So it was sort of just like opportunity, but also I think I was pretty attuned to that opportunity just from sort of the self-education I've been doing around how to attract money.
Yeah. So you exited that business in 17?
I think it was end of 2017.
End of 2017.
Yeah.
What were some of the big takeaways, like around like what you wouldn't do again? Like, what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, I mean, it was very formative. So I did everything kind of the hard way, like I entered an industry that was saturated, digital marketing, and I was pretty young, I was 25 when I started, sold when I was 29 or 30-ish, so sort of like 5-6 years in that business. And I think probably the most lessons have come looking at that business retrospectively after having a objectively better business now, you know what I mean? So I think like two of the biggest lessons I have from that first business was, the first one I think is around prioritization of the stakeholders. So in a business, you've got a lot of stakeholders, but say the 3 main stakeholders are yourself as a shareholder, you've got your employees, and you've also got your customers or the people that you serve, your clients. And so in my first business, I wanted to, be the cool boss. And I thought I was in a service business. I was in a digital marketing agency. So I thought I was going to put the team first. And so everything I did was sort of orientated around the team. We would have ping pong tables. We had like beer in the fridge from Wednesday to Friday. It was sort of pretty hedonistic almost for the employees. And I thought that was the right thing to do, because the idea was like if I treat my employees well, I'll be able to attract better employees for less money, because it was a pretty hard industry, a service business. You kind of need to get better talent than you can afford all the time. And I thought if I take care of those people and I get better team members, they'll service the clients better. And that was the idea. Kind of logical, but I think it was completely incorrect, right? And I think what a lot of people sort of felt was that all of it was a little bit self-serving. Like there was no real clear values or mission of that business. It was sort of like make Jay money and, have a good time at work was sort of the mission of the business. And we had a different mission, but it wasn't lived, And so having the business I've got now, how I've prioritized things is very much like we serve our clients, our members, and our whole mission is around helping these founders succeed. And in doing so, what I've realized is that employees want to do something. They want to feel a sense of purpose coming to work. They obviously want to make a lot of money. That's like a given. But really, if you create a mission that people can really get behind and they feel like they're coming to work and they're actually creating impact and they have a sense of purpose coming to work every day, I think that's really far better than like beer in the fridge and a ping pong table. Like actually giving people meaning and opportunity is huge. So I think the first big change between first business, second business was just orientation and prioritization. Business number one was team first, then me, then clients. This business has definitely from the very outset always been like member obsessed. It's our clients first, then team, and then myself. And I think the crazy thing is that I have better outcomes because of that prioritization. So that'll be kind of the first big shift I think that I've experienced between those two different businesses.
So 2019 Ecom Equation?
Yeah, it was around about 2019 I sort of started doing a little bit of consulting work. The current iteration, the current sort of product that we've got in the market was June 2021 was when I really launched the current version of Ecommerce Equation. I was working in a similar fashion but just a different sort of model between 2019 and 2021. So yeah.
Okay. Well, and so what was the problem you were looking to solve when you kind of said, I'm going to get into this e-commerce equation business model?
Well, look, there was just a proliferation of agencies, right? And initially agencies were productive, they were useful, but there was definitely a sentiment in the market that the returns from using an agency were diminishing. And I think what we saw was there was a business opportunity. There was a wave of like BizOp, SMMAs, so social media marketing agency as a business opportunity really became prolificated between 2019, 2020 through COVID, 2021. So we saw just like a massive wave of agencies hit the market. And as a result, the quality really dropped. So there was just this wave of people trying to start an agency. And all the gurus out there were saying, make 10 grand, make 20 grand a month running a social media marketing agency. All you have to do is get clients and you can just outsource the delivery to the Philippines through Fiverr. And that's what happened, right? So tons of people started getting burnt. And so trust was at an all-time low. So really the idea was rather than taking on the services and doing it all for people where it was completely homogenized service and people didn't trust it, was actually to sit on the same side of the table as the brand and teach them and show them how to actually build that capability internally. And I felt that there was like a huge amount of demand for that and literally no one servicing it. So that was the big sort of insight around why Ecommerce Equation came into existence.
2021, you're doing one-to-one coaching?
Yeah, right up to mid-2021, I was one-to-one coaching. So yeah.
And then you just had an aha that I've got to shift to one-to-many. Yeah,
look, so after I sold the agency, I was pretty burnt out. And the culture of the agency was like work hard, party hard. And I was a 20-year-old when I started it, and most of the people there were sort of like mid-20s, and they wanted that agency lifestyle, which essentially is like come to work with a bunch of young people, you do some work and you go and party, right? And I was turning 30 when I sold the business and I had my second kid and I just wanted to leave all that behind. So when I sold the agency, the idea was let's have a bit of a sea change. And obviously, I was in that house in Tice Hill, wasn't a great situation. So we said, let's go to Bali, right? We can get a cheap villa. I can do consulting online. And so that was the whole idea, that I'd do some consulting. We'd spend a couple of years in Bali and just kind of decompress. So initially the first couple of years, it wasn't meant to be massive, right? It was meant to just be like helping out my friends and, going to yoga and going surfing in Bali and sort of just living a bit of a lifestyle and doing a lifestyle business. But what happened was COVID hit, and I probably had 10 clients before COVID. Good clients, right? There was some like solid brands in there. But COVID hit, and working one-on-one with these brands, we were really able to capitalize on it. So the 10 brands I was working with, nearly all of them, nearly everyone got to like $1 million a month super quickly. It was actually outrageous. And so they told everyone they knew, right? And so before I knew it, I was like fully booked. And so I'd wake up at 8, I'd have my first Zoom call, and I'd log off at like 6, and I was just back-to-back Zoom calls. I'd like try to run to the toilet in between Zoom calls, and I was just like doing so much one-on-one. I was just fully burning out. It was an incredible immersion, but the one-on-one business model, I fully maxed it out. So I think I was doing like $1 million profit one-on-one from Bali. We came back during COVID, obviously, back to Australia. But you know, at that time when like COVID hit and it was all going down one-on-one, it was a pretty nice business, but I was just fully cooked. I was like so burnt out from Zoom fatigue. So I had to find a different business model, which is when I sort of like approached Taki more. And he's obviously the master of one-to-many and sort of made that switch June 2021.
Were you worried that you dilute the when you shifted to one-to-many, that you dilute that outcome for your customer?
100%.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like I thought I had this belief that Facebook ads, which was the primary way we were scaling, was so technical that it'd be impossible to teach in a one-to-one format, in a one-to-many format. You know, it was like it's so nuanced. And everyone's so different. So I had a lot of beliefs that it wasn't going to work. And so that was probably the hardest part. Like the actual practicality of changing was not that hard. Taki obviously has it all wrapped up in a bow. It was more like the belief and moving through that kind of process that was sort of the harder piece, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've heard through the grapevine that the delivery component of Ecommerce Equation is like next level. Can you like talk me through, I guess, why and how you get such great results for your customers?
Yeah, look, we have an 82 NPS score for our main program, Ecommerce Equation. So for those of you that don't know what an NPS is, it's like you ask someone out of 10 how likely you recommend this service to a friend or family member, and like good's 50 plus, like 60s, 70s kind of unheard of, 80s like world class. So like a lot of brands have a negative NPS, like Telstra and stuff have like minus 20. I mean, I don't know. Don't sue me, Telstra. I don't actually know your NPS. But like, yeah, so to have 82 is kind of like insane. I think if I was to actually like go to the meta level of like, why do we have such a great result? I think it probably is that we set, like from the very outset, the intention was to be member obsessed. So, you know, our values are kind of like good vibes, member obsessed. And I think all of the team that we attract have really embodied that because they've just seen me living those values every day. So we make so many decisions that are like bad for us in the short term because they're good for members, and I think that just kind of compounds. So I think at the meta level, it's because the team that we've got, I've got 100 people on my team now, and all of them live and breathe those values. So it's gone so far beyond what I could ever affect in the member base now. And I think that's the meta skill that kind of shaped what we do now is the mission, the values, and building a team that's like aligned with those. To actually get to some practical stuff of why it's so good, I think I'm just like really data driven. I think that background in finance was really telling. And I think what really a lot of businesses are suffering from is a lack of clarity and a lack of confidence. So what we do is we have literally billions, I think 5 billion in gross merchant volume, which is, you know, more than 10% of the Australian e-commerce market. And what we classify and categorize everyone's key performance metrics, key cost centers, and we kind of unify this data so that when people plug into it, they can really quickly see where they're strong, where they're weak, and what their actual constraint is. So many people are just like trying to fix problems that don't exist with tools that aren't the right fix for that problem. And when you actually show people based on data, this is the actual problem. Maybe people think they have a marketing problem, but in reality, it's a conversion problem. And then not only that, we've just got like such battle-tested playbooks, like to fix any of these problems. We've just got an immense amount of IP, and we spend a huge amount unpacking our curriculum. And then we've got coaching. So we have like just literally thousands of hours of group and one-on-one coaching every single month that helps people through those problems. So we kind of hold people's hand through the whole process. So it's like, I think it's very multifaceted, but I think giving people clarity into the problem they need to solve and confidence in the fix for that problem and support implementing it, it kind of just means that people move through what they need to move through and they kind of expand their business. And I think that's kind of like what Ecommerce Equation is created for e-commerce brands.
What do you think's mission critical in building a remarkable coaching business?
I think I think so many people don't have a product that is good enough, if I'm really honest. Like I think a lot of people think that they do good work, and they probably do. But if you like, it's so infuriating to me, Ben, because we spend so much on marketing. And every single time that we ask people when they join us where they heard about us, it's all word of mouth. And I'm like, why are we spending so much on meta ads, you know? Because like 80% of people say that I'm here because someone told me to be here. Not only one person, but like 10 people just said I have to join. And so I'm like, why are we doing all this marketing? But I think if your product has any negative word of mouth, it's such a killer. And even if it doesn't have negative word of mouth, if you're not so good that it's remarkable, as in people remark about it to their friends, then it's kind of a grind, you know? So I think people probably spend way too much focus on marketing and sales and not enough focus on product and actual outcomes for the members. And I think if you just like spent more time on product and getting a result for people, then like the marketing kind of takes care of itself. So I think a lot of people just kind of try to push a product that's mediocre or average, and making the product like remarkable and outstanding is probably like the number one differentiator that will kind of lead to a coaching business scaling. Because there's an inherent limit, like there's this churn ceiling where the actual number of people that leave every month kind of dictates how far you'll grow. Because if you've got steady state sales, there's a point where the sales equal, you know, people in equal the amount of people out, and you can do that calculation. And so like the less people that leave, the further you'll grow. And I think a lot of people think a lot about the, you know, people coming in and not so much about the people leaving. But I think, you know, you're far better off trying to keep every single person that comes into your world.
Yeah.
It has far better business outcomes, I think, when you actually model it out.
It makes sense what you're saying regarding your product, like, and just I guess product being remarkable, as you said, because correct me if I'm wrong, the way that Glow Capital found you is you weren't looking to be acquired.
No.
Glow Capital were talking to your customers, and they kept hearing from your customers about Ecommerce Equation, so they came knocking on your door.
Correct. Yeah. All the brands that were kind of like pumping.
Yeah.
They were like, "How are you doing this?" Like, "Oh, we're part of this crazy group, Ecommerce Equation," and so it kind of led back to me.
I love
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
I was scrolling through Ecommerce Equation last week, just doing some research, and two things that stood out was, one is no do-it-yourself DIY courses, like DIY courses don't work, and the second is obviously no agencies. My question is, at what point did you decide, like, hey, I'm not going to follow this traditional course route that a lot of people do. I'm going to use coaching as an output to get a result, and then two, I'm going to focus on this super specific niche of showing people how to basically bring paid media internal so they don't go external. Like, did you decide to do both of those together? Or like, how did that work?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was like this genius business plan that I just sort of like laid out and like executed on, but it was so organic. It was really just, that's what I was doing one-on-one. And so like the initial thing I did was just, I was doing like 2 sessions a week with each brand. And I just said to them like, hey, I repeat so much stuff to like 20 people every week.
Yeah.
And it's a waste of time. What if I just take all that stuff that's like consistent across all of you, and we just all get together on a Friday and we jam about it, and then you can meet some other cool brands. So that's how. So it's always been coaching. You know, I never thought let's do a course. I've done so many courses as well, and they kind of like 93% of people don't even finish the course.
That's true.
You know, so it's like if my number one value was member obsessed, it didn't feel very member obsessed or like brand obsessed, you know. It didn't feel very brand obsessed to just say like, here's some information, I hope you do it, good luck, you know. So I think it kind of comes back to the values piece, but it was always just like hands-on helping people, and so that's how it's always been from the outset. The paid media thing, like that's just how brands were scaling, right? When I started my agency, the agency just did SEO, and back then in 2012, like that's how people were scaling. But in 2019, you know, I'd say we're just coming out of the golden era of meta ads, but 2019 to 2021 was still really good, like a really good time for meta ads. So I was really just, you know, and if that changes, I would change. Like we would adopt. If meta ads stopped working today and it all went to like TikTok or TikTok Shop, we'd be 100% across it, because we just see so many brands and we can kind of just see where the gold vein is that people are kind of chasing, because we've just got such a hands-on view of the market.
Yeah.
So if it changed, we'd 100% change. And you know, a lot of if you look at what we do today and what we kind of coach on, it is very different than what it was 2 years ago, because the market has shifted. So paid media was just the thing that was working at the time, and I think it still is working. But yeah, that's just really how to get results for people, I think.
Such a smart, super specific niche. Like, have you got any competition doing exactly what you're doing?
We didn't when we started, but definitely the problem with a business like mine is that it's pretty transparent. Like you can figure out how much it costs a month. and then you can just look at like how many members we've got in school, and you can just kind of do the math. So I think a lot of people were looking at what we were doing going, holy smokes, that's like a big business. And so competition has emerged. But what no one gets is that they don't get the execution. You know, they don't see that we've got a team of 100. We've got like, you know, I got an 8-figure payroll. You know what I mean? Like they don't see that. They think, oh, we'll just throw some information up. We'll do a call a week. We have like 60 hours a week of structured group coaching across like all different topics. We do like close to 1,000 one-on-ones every single month. They don't see that. So they think like, and the problem is we get good marketers entering the space who are good at selling. Yeah. But the delivery sucks. So I think over time we'll have more competition. And I think it probably will dilute the trust in the market for the offering, because people have tried something that was substandard and judge us on that performance, just like agencies. But right now, I think we have such a strong reputation, particularly in Australia and New Zealand. We're a little bit isolated from the competition, but they're entering.
I kind of think it will help you because your delivery's so fucking good that they'll get burnt. They'll obviously be skeptical. They won't think you're going to deliver. They'll join the network and they'll be blown away just by your delivery. That I feel like they're just going to create more raving fans for you potentially.
I hope so. Like one example is one of the things I hate with the e-commerce industry is all these like kickbacks. Okay. So like, you know, there's all these marketing software providers, and they'll say like, you know, if you use our referral link, we'll give the person 3 months free, and then we'll give you a 20% kickback for life. You know what I mean? And so an example of like the difference is like we see other people in the market that are like pumping their affiliate links, trying to get people to sign up to all this software. Yeah. But it's not necessarily in the best interest of their clients. It's just trying to build a book of affiliate referrals. But we actually like created a member reward program where we actually I've got a full-time person plus a lawyer, and we basically go almost like a union, and we'll go into the most popular softwares and service providers, and we'll actually go into bat and do like group negotiation. And so what we do is we like negotiate a better rate, but it's also so rather than giving me a 20% kickback, just rebate it to the members. But then we'll also negotiate terms with our lawyer, and we'll also say it's not just for new people, which a lot of these affiliate links are, it's also for everyone who's already on your platform. So we can actually go in, and we're starting to save people thousands of dollars, like thousands. So I reckon at a certain point, like the membership will basically be free from our member rewards program. But that's just like a difference, you know. For me, I see other people like pushing their affiliate links, and I'm here and I've like paid a full-time manager, and I'm paying like thousands of dollars to lawyers, and I'm like rebating like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to people. And so like that's just the difference, you know. It's one's member obsessed, we're doing everything we can for the members. The other's sort of like a you know, just a business opportunity for someone that they're trying to monetize, I guess.
It's brilliant. So, I love that.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time in the ecom space. What do most founders in ecom get wrong?
I think they just don't know what problem they need to be working on. Okay. You know, especially the early stage founders. I think that there is so much noise out there that they just literally are trying to grow through checklists. Like people are saying you need to do conversion rate optimization, SEO, Google ads, TikTok ads, Snapchat, Pinterest, you know, Meta, you need to do email flows. It's just so people just get so overwhelmed trying to do it all. And they don't know, they do so much, they don't know what thing actually worked and what didn't. So there's no cause and effect. And they also sort of dabble in everything. They're not, one of those things might have worked, but they don't do enough of it. They don't have enough confidence to actually push through. So I think it's probably just like there's a massive clarity deficit.
Okay.
And I think probably the biggest way that shows up is often people are trying to improve their marketing, right? So they're trying to do better ads essentially, or they've tried Facebook and it didn't work. And sometimes the actual meta ads is the issue, but often there's something up or downstream of meta ads that is the reason it didn't work. And they theoretically are correct. If they could get performance out of meta that was so good, it probably would lead to profitable customer acquisition. But what they don't realize is there's a market, right? There's a market, and most of us are achieving sort of at a certain band of performance. And so if all of my brands are sort of spending at this level to get a customer from meta, and they need it to be half or a third of that for them to be profitable, it's probably easy to go fix why does it need to be so, why do you need such strong performance out of Meta, than trying to, be twice as good as everyone else in the market.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So like a classic example of that is people, say I need a 10 ROAS in Meta to be profitable. And then I'll go and look at their conversion environment. And on average, our brands will extract $3 for every visit that comes to the website on average, right?
Okay.
And they'll be sitting at $1,
Yeah.
And so like your website, your offer in the market is so ineffective that like you get a third of the money compared to an average pool of brands. And so when you're buying traffic, it's an auction. So you're competing with me and all my brands in an auction, and you literally can't spend as much because you're less effective on the other end. So it's probably more beneficial to that brand to go and look at why they aren't making as much money from every click than trying to get clicks for half the price. So such a classic bottleneck for people where they're just trying to fix the wrong problem.
Makes sense. So, like optimization, right?
Yeah, correct. So optimization of the right thing.
Yeah, of the right thing.
Yeah.
You obviously got like a plethora, an abundant amount of like customer success, right? Like so much. Even you said when you're doing your one-on-ones, you moved to Bali, all those, I think those first 10 brands you said were doing $1 million months. What brand or like what company like stands out as like a wildly successful customer success story? And it might not be based on a revenue metric, it could be based on a niche or an impact metric, but like, is there one that like stands out to you?
There's so many. Like everyone knows about the big guys, right? Everyone knows about the LSKDs and those guys. The stories of success that I love more are probably the lower key ones. So, like there's just. So to give you an example, right? There was a brand called Salt Lab, and she was a physiotherapist. And she realized that there wasn't a lot of good magnesium in spray form. There's a lot of like supplementation, but like basically spraying it and having it like ingest through your skin was a gap. So she created a brand called Salt Lab, and was doing okay. It was sort of like, it was okay. She joined. We did a bunch of work together, and fixed some things like got her AOV up, which led to her being able to spend more on ads. And she got to like a pretty good level of scale. But she was sort of like a little bit held back. Like she wasn't fully all in. And there was a fire on Australia Day 2023 in a fulfillment center. And this fulfillment center wasn't insured, essentially. And they kind of wiped their hands of the stock, and Clementine also wasn't insured. So she lost like $1.5 million worth of stock.
Jeez.
And was basically done for, right? And had a lot of calls with Clementine over that period where she was like, do I go into bankruptcy? Like, what do I do? And I think she had 3 young kids. And essentially she had this like moment of realization where she basically just had to do whatever it took. And so she did something she was very uncomfortable doing. She'd never been in front of the camera before. It was always a faceless brand. And so we got a plan together where she worked with a manufacturer to get a pre-order sent without needing to pay the deposit. And she basically just committed to actually selling enough stock on pre-order that she could pay for the stock before it landed to save her business. But what happened was she kind of stepped into her power, and she kind of got in front of the camera and basically just started telling her story. Like, this is my business. I know it looks like a big business, but it's literally just me and my kitchen table with my 3 kids. And we've just had this huge warehouse fire. And she basically just said, like, put it all on the line. And for her, it was extremely uncomfortable, right? To actually go from like being behind the scenes to being in front of the scenes. But what happened was she managed to get that first order paid for, which was insane, right? And a lot of the community of brands rallied around her and did some cross promotion and stuff like that, which was so cool to see. But what happened after that was that she just like went nuclear because she'd seen that it, the power of personifying the brand, and she sort of stopped in that moment. She had to say, I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks of me, I'm doing this for me and my family. And so the result that happened from that was she just like 20x the business.
Oh my God.
It was nuts. It was so nuts. Like I can't even describe like millions and millions and millions of dollars in profit, and spat out of that business over the next kind of 2 years after that fire. So like for me, they're the stories where I'm like, yeah, sure, there's like 300 million turnover businesses in the group, but like when I get to be on the phone with those founders in that moment, and a year later or 2 years later they come up to me at an event and they're just like, you don't know it, but like that call like made all the difference. I think that's the stuff that I really attach to, you know what I mean? Because the big stuff's great, but like those guys are probably going to be successful anyway, but those founders where you actually like can participate in like an inflection point in their life, I think is just so rewarding, and they're the stories of success that really stick with me more so than the $1 billion businesses or the $100 million businesses, if that makes sense.
That's a powerful story.
Yeah.
That's the kind of story I was looking for.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And she's such a rock star, you know, like it's just so amazing that the events are crazy. So we do these live events and so many people are just low-key crushing it in the background. And I have all these conversations with people and so many people come up to me at that event in person. They won't say it online. And sometimes I just forget what I say to people, you know, I'm like, probably got to watch what I say. People like really hang on to it, you know. But yeah, so like I think they're the successes that I love, Ben. You know what I mean? Just the ones that really move the dial.
What's the one thing about being a founder that no one prepared you for?
I think the hard part about being a founder is the consequences and the accountability, because when your entire when the entire outcome of your family's future, when your entire identity is tied up in a business that you founded, and all of the accountability leads back to you, it's incredibly stressful, you know, so you carry a lot with that. So I think just, no one can articulate what being a founder's like. It's just like you can't really explain what being a father's like until you've done it. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the thing that's been most striking to me is just initially how hectic it is when you've got so much riding on you and no real fallback. So, but it's you know, it is very rewarding. But it's like one of those, like anything that's great in life, it's sort of hard but rewarding. Like, I don't know, like being a parent or, you know, consistently going to the gym. It's all hard but rewarding. Yeah. So I think it kind of falls into that category. What do you think?
I definitely agree. It's very hard to explain to someone about what being a founder is like. Like someone was asking me once around, how do I change my life? And I said, and he wasn't a business owner. I said, become a founder.
Yeah.
Like that I experienced for me the most amount of transformation when I started my first business.
Yeah.
Around learning about my strengths, my weaknesses.
Totally. Because your business is such a reflection of you.
Correct.
Your mental state, like your strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
But it's hard to tell people to go and start a business. I used to be like very pro, like do it. But now, having seen different people take that advice and their outcomes, I don't think it's for everybody.
Agree.
And but it's hard because it's so transformational if you get it right. But it's also pretty hard.
Yeah.
You know? So you also don't want to push people into it that don't necessarily have the aptitude, you know, for it.
Yeah, I agree with that. You said the word identity. What part of your identity had to change the most, or even belief system, in order to grow the business to where you've got it today?
Yeah, there's definitely been some points where I think there were some limits based on identity, and I think there was a point where things were going sort of so well that it was getting beyond anything I was used to or could comprehend. And I read this book, I think it's called The Big Leap, that discusses the upper limit threshold. And essentially the idea is that, you know, you have a thermostat of the amount of happiness and success that you can comprehend and deal with in your life. And if you start to go beyond that, you reach this upper limit where inherently you feel like you don't deserve that much success or happiness in your life. And so that was a big moment. And I did plateau for a while, just at this limit where it's like, this is great. You know, why would I push more? And I think a few things happen here. It's almost like, you know, it's almost like, why would I grow more? Because, you know, growth takes work and work is painful. So, you know, if you're getting more pain for no increased utility of the success, I think that's a really interesting point where it can create friction. And so I did a lot of work around that point where it was like, I think you start off kind of hoping you replace your income from a job. And then, you kind of get to a point where you're like, holy crap, I'm making more than a lawyer or a doctor. And then it's like, and then there's a point beyond that where you're like, it kind of reaches absurdity, and it's kind of hard to comprehend that. And so to go beyond that, like a big factor when you're a solo founder, I think, and you're only looking after your needs from the outcomes of the business, I think it can be pretty tricky. So so for me, the way that I kind of worked through that was just, and I don't know if I could have done it otherwise, was just the focus on others. So I think really feeling like I was putting out so much into the universe, so much like prosperity, changing other people's businesses and their families and their communities and their customers, and just like a massive amount of value being provided to the marketplace.
Yes.
Helped me comprehend the fact that I was capturing a 10th or a 20th of that. So really focusing on like an externality, I think really helped through that process. But that was probably the biggest shift for me, was just trying to go, wow, like this is, being able to experience, like one skill is being able to create a successful business that's very prosperous. There is another skill of you as a human being able to comprehend having that much success and happiness in your life. Yeah. And I think that was not something I was fully prepared for, but that was a pretty big shift through that process, if that makes sense.
What does success look like for Jay right now compared to when you were a first-time founder back in 2012?
To me, there's some conditions I think everyone's seeking in life. And I think people are seeking freedom, and money provides freedom. I think they're seeking freedom in time as well, so being able to kind of be where you want and do what you want. And I think they're also seeking some purpose. And so I think success to me is striking a balance between those things. And so being a first-time founder, I didn't have any freedom time-wise. It was terrible, to be honest. And the money was okay, but not great. And purpose was okay, but not great. It's kind of a little bit hedonistic. And so I think now what success looks like is that this iteration of business, I have other people who are accountable. And so, I've got an incredible team, and the team are fully aligned, incentivized, and on mission. And so that allows me to kind of have less of everything kind of pointing back to me being accountable. And as a result, the freedom of time is there, and I also still get to participate and help people, which is a huge sense of purpose for me. And then obviously the financial outcomes from this business have been tremendous. So being in that position means that the consequences of it all going, working day to day are less extreme. So it kind of doesn't have that level of stress. So I think that's probably it, like striking a balance between those three.
Super interesting. Like getting back to what you said, during COVID, you went to Bali to not burn out. Then you burnt out, no freedom of time, capped on financially what you could earn. I think you said $1 million. But look at you now. You've got 100 staff. You've got freedom of time now. So you've got a bigger business. You've got freedom of time. You've got, obviously, you're financially free as well. It's just interesting to think that paradox.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
How that works, if you get it right.
If you get it right. And I think like there's this like, it's almost like a bow tie, right? Where at the start, it's amazing because it's like, you've got no staff. It's just you and a Zoom, and you're making kind of pretty good money. And then at the other end, you've got like a CEO, a CFO, a chief product officer, and you've got like heads of all the departments, and you're kind of independent again. But there's the murky middle bit, the valley of despair, where you build and you build and you build, and you kind of got to go make less money for more work for a long period of time to get to that point.
Yes.
And I think like staying stuck in that middle bit is a bad idea. I think you either need to like, be a lifestyle business and just literally optimize for maximum effective hourly rate, or you need to realize I'm building something and go for it. But being stuck in that weird spot, like once you get past 10 employees and you start really building structure and hierarchy, I think that's a dangerous place to live for too long.
Have you ever felt like while your business is growing the right way, you're meeting all your numbers, like everything is going great, but individually, like you're breaking?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always trade-offs, and I think some people can do it, right? But I think what I realized, Ben, is I was a big Tony Robbins fan. So every year I would do like my goal setting, and I'd do like my areas of focus, and I'd always like make these big goals. And what I realized is like I'd always hit the money and the business goals.
Which is great.
Yeah. It's just, and so then I stopped setting those goals, because I'm like, they just take care of themselves. And so, I just kind of realized that that's naturally where I like lent. But I do think that I'm sure some people can get through it without sacrifice. But for me, I've always just prioritized being like a good father and a good husband, and then the business, So the consequence of that is I get whatever's left for my health and happiness.
Yeah.
And so I think they're the things that frankly have sacrificed a little bit over the last 13 years in business. Starting to swing back, with that's kind of how I'm spending the additional time and freedom that I've got from being at this place. But yeah, like there's definitely been points where like my physical and mental health have suffered through the building process. Yeah. Just from the intensity of what was at hand and the fact that I had to step up and do it and no one else would. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was listening to Brian Chesky from Airbnb talking. I think he was talking to Stephen Bartlett.
Oh yeah.
And I think Stephen asked, I'm paraphrasing, like, hey, like, what's something that no one prepares you for? Hey? Like, when signing up to be a founder. And he said isolation.
Interesting.
And he was saying, like, I think they got thousands and thousands of employees. And he says, like, the bigger we were getting, like, even though there's more people around, I was becoming more isolated. Yeah. And I was reflecting on my journey. I was like, fuck, that's so true. Like, it's super isolating as like, especially like a founder with no co-founder, and you're basically extinguishing out all the big problems yourself. Yeah. Sometimes you haven't got a good community. But I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true, that the bigger you get and the more status that people have around your business, the harder it is to kind of connect like honestly with people. Yeah. But yeah, I think for the process, like what I've always, this last few years, I've always tried to be a little bit more conscious. Like, and I think there's times when you kind of know in your business, I'm stuck and I need to do something. Like when you're building a business, it's constrained by resources, time and money, right? So, and you are the ultimate backstop of resource. So if you don't have any more money to give the business to hire people, or you've got to sacrifice your time, basically. So I've just tried to be a lot more conscious with time and energy. So if I had an awareness that there was a particular bottleneck and the reason it wasn't moving was because I wasn't able to get the hours in the day to do it, then I would just consciously sort of put aside 6 weeks and I'd just say, I'm going to do an extra 2 to 4 hours. And sometimes that meant waking up at 4 a.m. and working to 7 when the kids woke up and just literally just working on that particular problem. Sometimes it meant just giving like weekends up for a month, and I would just sort of like, but I tried to constrain it, because I think if you're like, consistent reality is you need to work more than you like should to maintain your mental and physical health. That's not a good place to be long term. But the reality is, like, I think there are instances when to move your business forward, you are the ultimate resource as the founder. And sometimes you just have to put in like an extra 20 or 40 hours on a problem to fix it. But I'd just try I'd personally try and just like time block it. And then I was in this really consistent process of 6 weeks work, 1 week off, or 6 or 7 weeks work, 1 week off. And I sort of did these like 8-week blocks. And that week off was so important just to decompress. And I found it was way more productive to go super hard for 6 weeks and then fully decompress than just like grind the whole way through, because I think the output just like, drops if you get too far gone. So so that was kind of the cadence I was in while I was building, was just like 6 week sprints. Then I'd like book a week, and the kids weren't in school back then, so we'd just like go away, cabin somewhere near the beach and just like switch off. And so I think that really helped me like push, but also still not go crazy. Yeah.
How long were you in that cadence for?
I'd say 2-3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 2-3 years. Yeah, it was every 6 weeks I'd be like, all right, what's my number one problem? What's my hypothesis on what's going to fix it? I'd make a plan, and then I'd just go for it. And and I think the time constraint also helps you ship it. This is from a book called Shaping Up by the founder of Basecamp. So he advocates for like making a bet on a particular constraint or problem and like time blocking it. And so you sort of shape the work that you can ship it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And then you kind of like let all the fires burn around you because everyone's got a million problems.
Yeah.
But what happens is you try to fix everything and nothing improves and you just have like a million open projects. But if you just fix one thing and you actually fix it through to completion, and you can do that like 8 times in a year, your business is way better than just like constantly trying to like, you know, move everything forward at once. But it's hard to let so much stuff burn around you as a founder, particularly if you are a bit particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just the art of focusing.
Yeah. Have you been to the acquisition.com?
I haven't, but lots of friends have told me about it.
I mean, everyone just says the same thing, one constraint. Like the big takeaways. And it seems like you've adopted that from that Basecamp philosophy. You got into that pretty early.
Yeah.
If you had to start a business again from scratch, any business, what would you do differently? Like looking at what you're doing now and then your first business?
Yeah.
Or some high-level things?
What would I do differently? I really like the business I'm in. I really like the business I'm in. I think what I would do differently is I'd probably have an international focus sooner.
Okay.
I think we stayed domestic too long. I think I'd probably like think a little bit more globally from the outset, and I'd probably introduce technology sooner.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we did a lot right. Like I think, you know, like if the current version of the product started in 2021, was sort of 4 years in. I just don't know if I would have done much different, you know, like but if I had to start differently, probably worldwide focus.
Yeah.
And like the US is just such a big market. You know, there's 130,000 Shopify stores in Australia. There's 2.6 million in the US. It's just, it's like, you know what I mean? So like the TAM, the total addressable market is just crazy. So that'll probably be the big one, I think. A bit more of a worldwide focus. But it's hard when you want to find product to market fit and you sort of want to get sorted in one market first, you know? So, I don't know. That's probably one thing that stands out.
What's your experience been expanding to the US?
It's been really good. Like, I think the number one thing I was wanting to see was product to market fit, because it's a different landscape. You know, 50% of e-commerce is Amazon over there. I think that the results we've been getting initially have been really good. So I'm stoked about that. I think everyone's just bigger over there. Like a mid-sized brand there is a large brand here. And there's just so much commerce takes place online. I think Amazon has just really broken down a lot of barriers. Like everyone's just so used to buying online. Yeah. And it was interesting. I went over there 3 times last year, and I was over at a conference in New York, and I was just talking to someone about online retail. And one of the scenarios I gave them was like, if you needed to buy your kid Crocs, it was a Tuesday I met them. If you need to buy your kids Crocs for the weekend, how would you do it? I was like, I'll just go to Amazon. Yeah. And I was like, in Australia, everyone would go to Westfield and pick them up physically, because they're just like, it's 50-50 it's going to make it for the weekend, you know? And so like, they were like, you would go to the mall? Like who would go to the mall, you know? And so it's just such a hyper online consumer market, which is amazing. So it's actually a bit like doing e-commerce on easy mode. Yeah. So a lot, like I think Australian founders don't realize how hard it is here, because we have a 10% GST, or, you know, New Zealanders have a 15% GST, right? Over there, the average sales tax might be 4%. If that. Shipping here, it's like $12. There, it's like average of $4. Yeah. So just those two things, you're almost like 15 to 20% more profitable just on those two areas. Then you combine that with the fact that people are just like way more willing to convert online. Yeah. It's actually like doing e-commerce on easy mode. So when what that means is constraints breed resourcefulness. So we are so dialed in Australia, like with like increasing conversion rate, increasing AOV, all the efficiencies in every single area. We're so on top of like every 1% win there can be, so that we can actually achieve a profitable result. So when you go and transplant that level of efficiency into a market where it doesn't necessarily require it, you just disproportionately crush it. So, and on top of that, algorithm for Meta is hyper localized for the US.
Okay.
I don't care what anyone says. Like, it's just so much more dialed in for US. In Australia, we're so small, we have to intervene a lot more to get like more effective spend through the platform. But in the US, it's like way more able to just run on its own. So you combine those two things, it's just like, I don't know, like it's I think e-commerce is way better in the US.
I didn't know that about Meta in the US. Makes sense though.
Right, like they're from the US, like it's the biggest consumer market, like it's where Meta derive most of their ad revenue. So it's definitely over-indexing towards localization to that market. And it's such a bigger market, when you apply it to a smaller market, you start to see these symptoms like creative will burn out faster, or there's like this real truncation of spend, like it'll spend really heavily on a couple of ads and not on others, where that sort of just doesn't happen as much in the US market.
Jay, love jamming with you, brother.
Dude, we could talk for hours.
I know. I'm going to let you get back to your family. It's school holidays for you, so thanks for, I guess, stepping out and jamming.
It's been super fun, man. Anytime.
Thanks for
having me.
Cheers.
All right, cheers, dude.